In most parts of the world, an invasive species is a nightmare. It destroys ecosystems, it wipes out native life, it spreads faster than anyone can control. Governments spend millions trying to eliminate it. But what if, instead of fighting the problem, you turned it into an industry? Not just any industry, a multi-billion-dollar economic machine. This is the story of how China did exactly that. How a destructive invader became one of the most powerful food industries in the world, and how Europe, despite facing the same problem, failed to do the same. Origin from the Mississippi, the unlikely beginning. It all began thousands of miles away in the wetlands of the United States. The species known as the red swamp crayfish, native to the Mississippi River basin, was never meant to leave its home. But in the early 20th century, humans changed that. The crayfish was introduced to other parts of the world, for aquaculture, for pest control, and sometimes by accident. At first it didn't seem dangerous, but the red swamp crayfish had a hidden advantage. It was incredibly adaptable. It could survive low oxygen environments, polluted water, extreme temperature changes, and perhaps most importantly, it could reproduce rapidly. Very rapidly. Once released into new ecosystems, it didn't just survive, it exploded. The invasion of Europe, a continent under attack. Europe was one of the first regions to feel the impact. The crayfish spread across rivers, lakes, and wetlands. At first, the problem seemed manageable, but then it began to spiral. The invasive crayfish. Destroyed native species carried deadly diseases dug into riverbanks, causing erosion. Entire ecosystems began to collapse. Native European crayfish populations, already fragile, were devastated. And here was the real problem. There was no easy way to stop it. The species moved too fast, reproduced too quickly, adapted too easily. Europe was losing control. Why Europe lost control? The limitations of defense. So why couldn't Europe stop it? The answer lies in strategy. Europe treated the crayfish as an enemy, a pest to be eliminated. Efforts focused on chemical control, physical removal regulations to limit spread. But these methods had serious limitations. You can't realistically remove millions of crayfish from rivers. You can't poison entire ecosystems without destroying everything else. And regulations don't stop biology. The more Europe tried to control the crayfish, the more it spread. Because the core problem remained unsolved, demand was low. People weren't eating enough crayfish, which meant there was no economic incentive to remove them at scale. Rice crayfish integrated farming model, a genius shift, meanwhile, in China. Something very different was happening. Instead of asking, how do we eliminate this species? China asked, how do we use it? This single shift in thinking changed everything. Farmers began experimenting with a system now known as rice crayfish integrated farming. At first glance, it sounds simple: rice fields and crayfish in the same space. But the reality is far more powerful. Here's how it works. Rice paddies are filled with shallow water. Crayfish live within the fields. They feed on pests and organic waste. Their movement aerates the soil. The result? A perfectly balanced ecosystem. The crayfish reduce the need for pesticides, improve soil quality, provide an additional income source, and the rice fields provide a controlled environment, limit invasive spread, support large-scale farming. This wasn't just agriculture, it was system design. Explosive growth of the crayfish industry. Once the model proved successful, growth became unstoppable. China didn't just adopt crayfish farming, it scaled it massively. Within years, millions of farmers joined the system. Entire regions specialized in crayfish production, supply chains expanded nationwide. Cities like Hubei province became global hubs of crayfish production. Production numbers skyrocketed. What started as a small experiment turned into an industry worth billions. But growth alone wasn't enough. China needed something else: demand. Crayfish processing industry. Building the machine to support massive production, China built an entire ecosystem around crayfish processing. Factories were developed to clean package, freeze flavor. Crayfish wasn't just sold fresh. It became a product, standardized, export-ready, value-added. You could now find pre-cooked crayfish seasoned packages ready to eat meals. This changed everything because processing does one crucial thing. It multiplies value. Instead of selling raw seafood, China created a global food product. The massive consumption engine, culture meets industry. But the real breakthrough wasn't production. It was consumption. China didn't just produce crayfish. It turned it into a cultural phenomenon. Summer nights in Chinese cities became synonymous with street food stalls, spicy crayfish dishes, social dining experiences. Crayfish became more than food. It became an event, a lifestyle. Restaurants built entire menus around it. Delivery platforms made it accessible everywhere. Social media amplified the trend. Suddenly, demand exploded. And here's the key. When demand increases, harvest increases, which means the invasive species is naturally controlled, not by force, but by appetite. Europe versus China. The key difference. Now compare that to Europe. Same problem, same species, completely different outcomes. Europe focused on control, restriction, elimination. China focused on utilization, scaling, integration. Europe saw a threat. China saw an opportunity. And that difference changed everything. Because ecosystems don't respond well to force, but they respond incredibly well to incentives. System-level lessons, thinking beyond the problem. This isn't just a story about crayfish. It's a lesson in systems thinking. China didn't solve the problem directly. It redesigned the system around it. Instead of fighting nature, it worked with it. Instead of removing the species, it absorbed it into the economy. This created economic incentives, environmental balance, scalable solutions, and perhaps most importantly, sustainability, because a system that generates profit will sustain itself. Conclusion: turning disaster into dominance. In the end, what makes this story so powerful is not just the result, it's the mindset behind it. An invasive species that destroyed ecosystems in Europe became a billion-dollar industry in China, not through control, but through creativity, not through resistance, but through integration. And that raises a bigger question. How many other global problems are waiting for the same kind of thinking? Because sometimes, the most powerful solution isn't eliminating the problem, it's transforming it. Because sometimes, the most powerful solution isn't eliminating the problem, it's transforming it. And when you step back and look at the full picture, this story becomes something much bigger than crayfish. Because what happened here was not luck, it was design. A deliberate shift in thinking, from reaction to strategy. Most countries, when faced with an environmental threat, default to control. They build systems to resist, to contain, to fight. But those systems are often expensive, fragile, and temporary. Because nature doesn't follow rules. It adapts, it evolves, it finds a way around barriers. China took a different path. Instead of building resistance, it built alignment. It asked a different question. Not, how do we stop this? But, how do we make this useful? And that single shift unlocked something powerful. Because once a problem becomes useful, it stops being a problem. Think about it. An invasive species, once considered destructive, is now being harvested, transported, processed, and consumed at massive scale. Every plate of crayfish served is part of the solution. Every farm, every factory, every delivery is quietly reducing the population. Not through force, but through demand. And this is where the real genius lies. Because demand does something that regulation never can. It scales. Governments can pass laws, they can set limits, they can invest resources. But those systems are always constrained. Limited by budgets, limited by manpower, limited by time. Demand, on the other hand, has no such limits. When people want something, they create entire industries around it. They innovate, they optimize, they expand. And that's exactly what happened here. Crayfish didn't just become food, it became an economic engine. Farmers improved techniques, factories increased efficiency, logistics networks expanded reach, restaurants created new experiences, each layer building on top of the other, until what started as a small agricultural experiment turned into a fully integrated system. A system that feeds itself, grows itself, sustains itself, and perhaps most importantly, a system that solves the original problem without ever directly attacking it. Now compare that to the alternative. The traditional approach: spend millions on removal programs, deploy temporary solutions, watch the species return, repeat the cycle. It's a loop, a constant battle, with no clear victory. But China broke that loop. Not by fighting harder, but by thinking differently. And that's the lesson that resonates far beyond this story. Because invasive species are not unique. They exist all over the world, in different forms, in different industries, in different systems. Sometimes they're environmental, sometimes they're economic, sometimes they're technological, problems that seem uncontrollable, unstoppable, too complex to solve. But what if the solution isn't to eliminate them? What if the solution is to redesign the system around them? To turn weakness into strength, to turn disruption into opportunity, to turn chaos into structure. Because at its core, that's what innovation really is. Not just creating something new, but seeing something familiar in a completely different way. And once that shift happens, everything changes. What was once a burden becomes an asset. What was once a threat becomes an advantage. What was once ignored becomes essential. And that's exactly what happened with crayfish. Today, China doesn't just manage the species, it leads the world in crayfish production, consumption, innovation, an entire industry built on something that once seemed like a disaster. And the rest of the world? Still trying to catch up. Because the gap isn't just technological, it's philosophical. It's the difference between reacting and rethinking, between controlling and leveraging, between solving a problem and transforming it. And as global challenges continue to grow, from climate change to resource scarcity to ecological imbalance, this way of thinking becomes more important than ever. Because the future won't belong to those who simply fight problems, it will belong to those who understand them, redesign them, and ultimately, use them. So the next time you hear about an environmental crisis, or an uncontrollable system, or a problem that seems too big to fix, remember this: somewhere, there may be a different answer, not in resistance, but in reinvention. Because sometimes, the most powerful solution isn't stopping the problem. It's turning it into something the world can't live without.